Hello everyone, this is our Discrete Mathematics and SEM project for the course SC205. This is the list of the names and the student IDs of our team. Now, to explain you more about our project, I'll first need to introduce you all with a data structure known as adjacency matrix, which is used to represent digraphs. Now, why are we doing this? Because we are going to study about the food web, which can be think of as a directed graph, where if we take each animal in an ecosystem as the node and we take the edge representing their dependencies of food. Like if we take animal A, then the animal A dependent on animal B will be represented by an arrow pointing from animal A to animal B. Now, how can we represent this in a match? So, for this, we use a n cross n square matrix, which will be known as adjacency matrix. In this matrix, if we list all the animals of the ecosystem in a rows and columns, and we represent the rows with I and we represent with columns with J, then if any animal I or any organism I, depending on the other animal or organism J, will be represented by placing 1 in that matrix at the cell Aij, and rest all the cells of the animals representing I animal not dependent on jth animal will be represented by placing 0 at that cell. Let's have a look at the small ecosystem consisting of 3 animals and try to construct adjacency matrix for this. Here we have a cat, rat, mouse, such that cat depending on rat and a mouse and rat depending on mouse. Now we will try to construct the adjacency matrix. For this, we will represent the rows as the animal and the columns as their sources. Means I as the organism and the J is the source of the ith organism. As we have seen that cat eats rat and mouse, whereas rat only eats mouse. So let's number these animals as 1 cat, 2 rat, 3 mouse and represent them in the rows and the columns. Then if we say cat eats rat means I eats J, that is I is 1, J is 2, means first row, second column will be numbered 1. But cat does not eat itself, so that means first row, first column will be numbered 0. And similarly, the first row, third column which represent cat eats mouse is also numbered 1. And if we go for a second row representing the rat, then we have a 1 in the third column, which means that rat eats mouse. But rat does not eat cat or either itself means rat. And if the important thing to notice here is the third row, which is all zeros, means mouse does not eat either cat, rat or itself. So this way we are able to represent the food web of an ecosystem. Now let's further understand the other applications of the same thing which we did in the previous slide. Now, if we perform the matrix multiplication of the adjacency matrix with itself, we get a matrix A square that will be representing the indirect food resources of the ith organism on the jth organism. Means, if we say animal A eats animal B and animal B is dependent on some other animal C, then somehow animal A is also dependent on animal C, because if C got extinct, then B will be not surviving there, and so directly A will be also getting affected. So this is known as the indirect food resources for any organism. Now if we see the square matrix, in the first row, third column we have a 1 which represent cat has the indirect food resource of mouse. Now let's try to understand the third important information that we can gather from performing some matrix algebra. This is the getting the total dependencies of the sources for any animal. So now if we perform the matrix addition of the A and A square, we get the total number of dependencies for the ith animal on the jth animal. So if we see the example we got previously, we get the resultant matrix as 0 1 2 0 0 1 and 0 0 0, which means that cat is dependent on rat in two ways. One is the direct way and the another is the indirect way, whereas rat is only dependent on mouse in a single way.
Okay, now we will talk about extension of an organism or species. From graph and adjacency matrix, we can see that for mouse there is no any food source. So number of mouse will slowly decrease and start extincting. Now in graph we can see that rat and cat are also dependent on mouse. So extinction of mouse will lead to extinction of rats also. And cats whose food source is rats and mouse both, cats will also gradually start extincting. Now we will talk about history of mathematical terms that are used in our project. First is graph theory. When we talk about graph theory, we can't forget Leonhard Euler, who was founder of graph theory. Seven bridges of Königsberg is historical mathematical problem, and its negative resolution was led to foundation of graph theory. In mathematics, when we want to model pairwise relation between object, we use graph theory, which is study of graphs. Mainly there are two types of graph, undirected and directed. In our project, our aim is to know who eats whom. So directed graph was useful. So we have used directed graph for showing dependencies in food web. Now we will talk about adjacency matrix. In graph theory and computer science, adjacency matrix is a square matrix that is used to represent a finite graph. It indicates that pair of vertices are connected with edges or not, means they are adjacent or not in graph. Adjacency matrix of a directed graph can be asymmetric. A non-zero element Aij indicates an edge from I to j, and Aji indicates an edge from j to I.
Okay, so up till this point, we understand what is our project about and how it is useful, what we have used, its history and lot more. So now getting into the commercialization part, how we can extend this to large scale. So in future, we can create a software which will do some similar type of analysis as we did here. Here we understood just with the help of three example organism of three example in a one food web, but there could be a very large ecosystem. It can be of 300 or 3000 and it can be very large. So for that type, we cannot just directly see the diagram and conclude anything. For that, we need a very large adjacency matrix and we also need some ways to determine the dependencies, direct dependencies and indirect dependencies. So the software should be such that it should constantly monitor the change in population of any particular species and should immediately propose the necessary steps to be taken to the responsible authorities. So if any animal is going to extinct, if it is extincted day by day, then that particular authority should know that and he or she should take necessary steps, because the organisms which are directly or indirectly dependent on the organism which is getting extincted, then their life is also put in danger with the extinction of this wildlife. So this kind of software can be very useful in wildlife management, also for maintaining balance in ecosystem and a lot more applications. So what are our main targeted groups for which this software might be helpful? It could be helpful for the authorities of the forest department who takes care of the animals. For the one who takes care for the aquatic life management, it can also be related to aquatic life management. for the wildlife scientists who take study of this, who get to updates of which animals are there in particular year, their number, and also for the NGOs who work for wildlife protection, because nowadays wildlife protection is a very big problem in our country. So this website or this application might be very useful for the NGOs who protect for wildlife. Okay, the main theory here used is the graph theory, and graph theory has lot more applications. Mainly graph theory is used in estimation problems. Here also we have to estimate which source or which organism is dependent on which another organism. So for dependencies, for estimations like problems, graph theory is very important. One such important domain is in stock investment prediction. Like if say one company is having three different plans of investment, and now each plan has another three different sections as for low risk, high risk and medium risk. So calculation of which plan would yield maximum return, which would yield minimum return, which is profitable, which is unprofitable, all should be calculated using graph theory, using agency matrix. So agency matrix is very useful for directed graph theory. So mainly here graph theory and agency matrix we have used in our food web project. So this is the final project where we connected nature, ecosystem, food web with the mathematics and graph theory. Thank you for this.